Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steph, and is expecting their child. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas. Kelsey was the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. Her parents, Gregory and Missy Smith, raised her alongside her siblings, Steve, Lindsay, Kat, and Zach. Gregory Smith, the family patriarch, was a retired U.S. Navy veteran and had served in the police force for over 20 years. He was enjoying his retirement after a long and dedicated career. Kelsey grew up in a loving family environment, close to all her siblings. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, has dedicated her life to health care, working at a local hospital for many years. Despite her busy career, she has managed to balance work and family life well, raising her children and creating a warm family environment. Kelsey has been an active, outgoing, and creative child since she was a child. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments, which she learned in music school. She was also active in school theater and choir performances. Kelsey is also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and soccer. She often attends sporting events with her father and brother, cheering on her local team. With a great sense of humor and many talents, Kelsey has left a deep impression on those around her. Her love for animals, which began in childhood, inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian after college. During her senior year of high school, Kelsey found work at the local symphony orchestra, where she played the clarinet at various city events. Through this job, she set a goal of saving enough money within 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Although her parents were concerned that the car was an older model, they offered to contribute to the cost so that Kelsey could buy a newer car from the family budget. However, Kelsey was determined to buy her first car herself, using only her own savings, so she turned down their offer. The Kelsey family prioritized providing their children with a well-rounded education, focusing on education and personal development. They also instilled in their children a strong sense of discipline. The family had clear rules that everyone followed without exception, including sharing their plans and notifying each other if they would be out late. Kelsey demonstrates her adherence to these rules by being punctual, sharing her whereabouts with her parents, and informing them of her social activities. During her senior year, Kelsey began a romantic relationship with John Beer Smith. She describes it as deeply in love and like the relationships depicted in books or movies. They celebrated New Year's 2007 together and have been virtually inseparable ever since. John, who is 1 year older than her, appears to be a responsible and caring partner who treats Kelsey with respect. Both sets of parents approve of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey turned 18, graduated from high school, and was accepted into a prestigious university in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. This was one of the happiest times of her life. However, these happy days did not last long. Kelsey attended parties with her classmates to celebrate the end of high school and enjoyed spending time with John. At this point, Kelsey had achieved everything she wanted, got into her dream college, and was in a fulfilling relationship with a wonderful partner who was planning to propose. Her life was bright and happy. However, her disappearance from a shopping mall parking lot on June 2, 2007 changed everything. Kelsey and her boyfriend John were about to celebrate a big milestone, 6 months of dating. To make it special, John planned to propose with a custom-made engagement ring and had booked a romantic dinner for they of them. Unaware of John's plans, Kelsey also wanted to surprise him with a gift. That Saturday, she got ready, drove to a nearby Target Corporation store, and called her mother around 7 p.m. to say she had found the gift but needed a special bag for it. Her mother suggested checking the mall across the street from Target Corporation for a romantic gift bag. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and promised to be home soon. John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. However, after that conversation with her mother never heard from Kelsey again. Kelsey failed to return home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to discover Kelsey's absence. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was unlike Kelsey to ignore phone calls and texts. She had vanished in a busy area during the daytime, and no one had witnessed her disappearance. Kelsey's father and 2 eldest siblings began searching for her. They found her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, which gave them a glimmer of hope that she might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after thoroughly searching the mall, inquiring with salespeople and security guards, they concluded that Kelsey was not there. Upon returning to the car, they found it undisturbed with no signs of struggle or violence. Kelsey's father, a former police officer, decided not to touch anything to preserve potential evidence, as the car might be part of a crime scene. Kelsey's parents reported her missing to the police the same day, but the police were initially hesitant to start searching right away. They explained that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't be considered missing until 24 hours had passed. However, Kelsey's father, who had connections, insisted on an immediate search. He also asked hospitals in the city if a woman matching Kelsey's description had been admitted. That evening, the police interviewed Kelsey's family and John to confirm their whereabouts and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in missing person cases. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the Target store, which showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing, making a purchase, and leaving while talking on the phone to her mother. She was asking her mother about a gift bag and then drove to the Oak Park Mall across the street, as her mother suggested. Kelsey parked her car near the side entrance of the mall, close to the wall. Her car was inspected by experts and appeared to be untouched from the outside. The gift for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, including a tablet and wallet with $300 in cash, was in the back. Since everything was still inside, robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. It appears Kelsey only left with her credit cards and phone, as everything else was still in the car. There were no signs of struggle, blood, or damage, and the only unknown fingerprint was found on the driver's seatbelt, which did not belong to Kelsey, her family, or boyfriend. The investigation tried to track Kelsey's location through her mobile phone signal, but the device was inaccessible, possibly turned off or damaged. Despite this, it was possible to determine the last known location of the phone to narrow the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, delayed providing the necessary data for several days. Instead of refusing to cooperate, the company kept promising to look into the matter, which effectively slowed down the process. In 2007, telecom companies were permitted to keep subscriber information from law enforcement, including police and FBI, without a court order. They based this on data protection laws. Not even situations where someone's life was in danger were exempt from this rule. A closer look at surveillance footage revealed a disturbing detail: a mysterious stranger was stalking Kelsey. The man initially did not attract attention because he kept a safe distance and did not interact directly with Kelsey. He was a Caucasian man between the ages of 20 and 25 with dark hair, short and a light beard, wearing a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He followed Kelsey into the Target store about 30 seconds and continued to follow her from a distance as she browsed the various sections. The surveillance cameras captured his movements, and his behavior was later described by the prosecution as similar to a predator stalking its prey. After Kelsey left the store, the man followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck, waiting until she was alone. It's possible that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was standing close by while she was on the phone. This may have allowed him to learn about her plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Unfortunately, Kelsey had parked her car in a poorly lit spot, next to a side door and a storage area, which made it difficult for the cameras to capture what happened next. As Kelsey sat in her car, the man parked his truck beside her and got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and black shorts. The stranger came up to her on the driver's side and, likely threatening to harm her, forced her to get behind the wheel of his Chevrolet. The truck then drove away in an unknown direction. Due to Gregory Smith's connections and experience, he believed that the more attention and coverage the case received, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. As a result, the story was featured in both national and international media, including the popular show America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage showed the stranger following Kelsey, the clearest images of his face were broadcast on the news, urging viewers to come forward if they recognized him. The police received calls from people claiming to have seen the man in various cities and states, although most of these reports turned out to be incorrect. Each lead was investigated. On June 6, a woman named Mrs. Miggs called the police, stating that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, from the footage. Initially, she had hesitated to report it due to doubts, but the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Edwin owned an old 1970s Chevrolet. On June 6, 2007, two significant events occurred in the investigation. The police received crucial data from Verizon Communications about the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal. This information pinpointed a specific cell tower, allowing the police to establish a 1.1-mile search radius to the north. Within 45 minutes of starting the search, Kelsey's body was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 30 meters from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that she had been brutally assaulted and strangled with her own belt. Kelsey's body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her. Her body was carelessly discarded in the bushes, partially covered with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed to the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Despite the state of her remains, the examination confirmed that the body was indeed Kelsey Smith. The second major event on June 6 was the arrest of the main suspect. When police arrived at his residence, he remained calm and acknowledged that his friends called him Jack. He agreed to provide a statement at the police station. During the interrogation, Edwin Hall claimed he had never seen Kelsey before, even when shown a photograph of her. When presented with surveillance footage from the store that showed him following her, he insisted that he had only visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her. He suggested that their appearance together in the footage was just a strange coincidence. Despite being shown irrefutable evidence, Edwin seemed confident that he had covered his tracks and couldn't be held accountable. He had thoroughly cleaned his van and had used protection during the assault, leaving no DNA evidence behind. However, Edwin agreed to cooperate with the investigation and provided his DNA sample and fingerprints. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when his fingerprints matched those found on Kelsey's car's seatbelt buckle. A thorough search of his home also revealed a hidden air pistol with Kelsey's DNA on the barrel. Edwin was officially charged with abduction, assault, and murder. A jurisdictional issue arose, as Kelsey was abducted in Kansas but her body was found dead in Missouri. This was important because it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, Edwin faced the possibility of a capital punishment trial and sentence. Edwin realized the seriousness of his situation and, after consulting his lawyer, decided to confess to the crime and provide details in the hope of a reduced sentence. He described how he had noticed Kelsey entering the store and followed her, getting close enough to overhear her phone conversation about visiting the shopping center across the street. Edwin waited until Kelsey was alone, then followed her to the adjacent parking lot. He was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a pistol, and waited for Kelsey to return to her car. As she was getting into the driver's seat, he prevented her from closing the door. Kelsey had already pulled out the seatbelt, and Edwin allowed her to buckle up, leaving his fingerprint on it. Edwin then put the pistol barrel in Kelsey's mouth, threatening her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat. Kelsey drove Edwin's truck while he aimed the gun at her and gave her directions. When they reached a remote area at the state border, Edwin ordered Kelsey out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted and strangled her with the belt, then covered her body with branches. He thoroughly cleaned his truck to eliminate any evidence of Kelsey's presence, including fingerprints and DNA. He then hid the pistol, which had Kelsey's saliva on it, in his home, believing it would never be discovered. When questioned about his motive, Edwin failed to provide a clear answer, instead making a comment about the victim's physical appearance. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, revealing a pattern of abuse and harassment by Edwin. Further investigation uncovered more instances of Edwin's wrongdoing, including coercing a 14-year-old neighbor into intimacy, harassing a waitress, and fleeing a restaurant without paying. These findings led to additional charges, including corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft. Edwin's lawyer attempted to garner sympathy from the court by highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimization, and unstable upbringing. Despite these efforts, the defense was unsuccessful. Edwin's lawyer was the only person to speak in his defense and show support. Notably, Edwin's wife attended all court hearings but chose not to defend her husband, instead sitting quietly in the background. On September 16, 2008, a Johnson County judge sentenced Edwin Hall to 27 life sentences without parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Kelsey family for his actions and broke down in tears. He is now serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna Marie Schneller was an 18-year-old with a vibrant personality who loved Mexican food, music, dancing, and roller coasters. She was an exceptional student, and ranking as the top student at Everest High School in Washington, according to her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller. Brianna had a promising future ahead, with a trip to Tennessee planned for the summer and a notable achievement as the only student in Wisconsin to qualify for a national competition in professional and technical fields. Brianna's passion was to pursue a career in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food service industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Those who knew her, including friends, colleagues, and customers, described her as kind and responsive. Brianna's life was on the verge of two major events: her graduation and her wedding to her 22-year-old fiancé, Sebastian Ramirez. Brianna's parents initially disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and concerns that she was growing up too quickly. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they began to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious plans for their future together. They eventually moved in together, sharing an apartment on 12th Avenue in WoW with Sebastian's 19-year-old younger brother, Hugo. To outsiders, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, burning the envy of many for their close friendship. Sebastian and Hugo supported Brianna's interests and also worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. It's likely that this is where Sebastian and Brianna first met. Despite their seemingly perfect life, tragedy struck on May 2, 2009. The day began like any other, with Sebastian waking up early and trying not to disturb Brianna, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. It was a day off from school, and she had no reason to wake up early. Brianna woke up while her boyfriend was in the shower. They exchanged affectionate greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse Hugo, who had returned home early that morning after a late-night party. Hugo was clearly hungover. After Sebastian left for work, which was just a short walk away, his younger brother followed suit. Brianna was left alone in the apartment. Later, Hugo was feeling unwell. His hangover was severe, and he was struggling to concentrate. He decided to take an early lunch break and headed home to rest. When he arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he entered his brother's room, he noticed that it was in disarray. Brianna was lying on the floor, unresponsive. Hugo rushed to her side and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. At first, he didn't notice the blood. Hugo discovered a horrific scene when he removed a towel covering a woman's face. Her severe injuries had left Hugo almost unrecognizable, and he was utterly shocked and overcome with grief at the sight of her. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act quickly and ran to his neighbor's apartment on the floor below for help. The neighbor, a woman, called emergency services at 1:30 p.m., who was too distraught to speak clearly. The emergency operator received the call and was told that she was the girlfriend of Sebastian. She was lying on the floor, severely injured with cuts all over her body and a badly disfigured face. The operator was informed that she showed no signs of life. Police and paramedics rushed to the apartment building after receiving a call. When they arrived, they found a crowded parking lot, but one person stood out, Hugo Ramirez. He approached the officers and led them to the apartment where the incident occurred. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Brianna's body was severely injured, with deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. Hugo was visibly shaken and could barely speak as he led officers to the apartment. He simply pointed to Brianna's body, and the officers took note of the scene. The officers asked Hugo to leave the room so that forensic specialists could begin their examination. The specialists observed that the blood on the floor had already started to dry, suggesting that Brianna's body had been there for some time. It was clear that she had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the attacker had overpowered her, leaving behind a crime scene with a significant amount of evidence. The forensic team found several key pieces of evidence, including a bloody iron on the floor, which appeared to have been used to strike Brianna's face. The iron was broken, with pieces scattered nearby. 2 knives were found in the bathroom sink, one of which was missing its sharp tip. Blood was also found on the soap, suggesting that the attacker had washed their hands after the crime. However, the most notable piece of evidence was a bloodied shoe print on the carpet, which drew the investigators' attention. The investigation of the house uncovered many new details. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim may have known her attacker or that the perpetrator had a way to enter the apartment without breaking in. Additionally, a large sum of money was found scattered throughout the apartment, consisting of bills ranging from $1 to $20. According to Hugo, this money was comprised of tips they had accumulated at work, which were carelessly left lying around. At first glance, it appeared that nothing was missing from the apartment, indicating that the attack was not motivated by robbery. This theory was further supported by the discovery of a broken knife tip in the victim's body. The fact that the knife broke during the attack indicates that the perpetrator applied considerable force. It's crucial to grasp what may have motivated someone to hold such intense feelings of anger and aggression against she. Uncovering the cause of this brutal and unprecedented attack is crucial in shedding light on the matter. Craig and Laura Schneller anxiously waited at the police station, having heard that something terrible had happened at their daughter's home. Unfortunately, they had been unable to contact Brianna, and their hearts were heavy with worry. The officers had to tell the parents Brianna that their worst fears had come true. The news was devastating. Their daughter, Brianna, had passed away. The loss of a child is one of the greatest sorrows a parent can experience, and for the Schnellers, it was a life-altering moment. To confirm the identity, the authorities showed them photographs of Brianna, but only those that clearly showed her face, as some of the other images were too graphic. After confirming the tragic news, the Schnellers were in shock. With the help of a psychologist, they were able to compose themselves and answer questions from the police. They were eager to assist in the investigation and help catch the person responsible. The Schnellers provided as much information as they could about their daughter's life, but they insisted that she had no known enemies. They also revealed that Brianna's mother had been the last person she had spoken to that morning. Her mother, Craig, took Brianna's car to the repair shop and messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to let her know. Brianna replied to the message. The investigation shows that the tragedy occurred at a point in time that was after they sent messages to each other and before Hugo's arrival. As part of their inquiry, detectives first interviewed the Ramirez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, questioning them separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, stated that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke up his brother, Hugo. Around 10:15 a.m. Sebastian claimed he was already at the restaurant when he received a phone call informing him about the incident. Hugo's account corroborated Sebastian's, saying he left the house around 10:15 a.m., shortly after his brother. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. due to feeling unwell and wanting to rest. When Hugo found Brianna's body, his reported illness and fatigue vanished almost instantly. The events that followed were a daze. He was so shocked that he couldn't think clearly about how to respond. His mind went blank and his hands shook uncontrollably, prompting him to seek help from a neighbor. The Ramirez brothers' accounts were believable, and their distress seemed authentic. Nevertheless, the police had seen convincing performances before, so they needed concrete evidence to confirm their innocence. It was possible that one of the brothers was involved in the crime, and the other was covering for him. To investigate this, detectives asked about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about whether he had any issues with Brianna or if they had argued, but he denied it. Hugo also explained that while he found her attractive and charming, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never jeopardize his happiness. Brianna was like a sister to Hugo. And after hours of questioning, neither Hugo nor Sebastian raised any suspicions. The police took DNA samples from the brothers and allowed them to return home. To verify the brothers' alibis, detectives spoke with employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. The brothers' accounts checked out, and the possibility of a domestic-related crime was ruled out. The investigation continued, and the question remained, who could have committed such a heinous crime against an innocent young woman? Was there a predator lurking in the city who had been watching Brianna and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The police considered this possibility as they analyzed the evidence. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. Brianna was first hit on the head with a blunt object, likely an iron, which caused a severe injury. The perpetrator then cut her throat and inflicted multiple stab wounds to her body. The attack was extremely violent, with so many wounds that even experts couldn't count them all. At least 2 of the injuries were fatal. DNA from an unknown source was found under Brianna's fingernails, indicating that she struggled and resisted her attacker. Initial reports that nothing was missing from Brianna's home were later found to be incorrect. Brianna's phone had actually been taken, and Sebastian was the one who discovered its loss and informed the detectives. This new information became a crucial lead in the investigation. The police learned from the phone provider that the phone was still active and obtained its location. Surprisingly, the phone was found to be nearby, specifically on the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. This revelation added complexity to the case, given the brothers' solid alibi and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the missing phone. The detectives rushed to the location and found that the phone's coordinates led them to the parking lot of a shopping center that housed the restaurant. A search of the area revealed that the phone was likely in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found in a container. Inside the bag were the victim's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves had a blood stain. The bag and its contents were sent to the lab for further analysis, which could potentially yield fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. After seeing a photo of the bag's contents, Sebastian identified his girlfriend's underwear. The police then questioned the restaurant staff multiple times. On May 5th, they asked everyone to provide a DNA sample and checked for any scratches or injuries. They also carefully reviewed all the surveillance footage, both inside and outside the building and nearby businesses. The police had a challenging task to figure out who had thrown away the bag. A kitchen worker initially caught the investigators' attention because he arrived late to work after Brianna had already been found lifeless. However, he had a solid alibi. He had been pulled over for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Reviewing the security footage was crucial to the investigation, which led them to another suspect, Raul Ponce Rocha, the 24-year-old kitchen manager. On the day of the crime, Raul left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned 35 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., without it. When questioned, Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant, who lived in the same building as Brianna and her colleagues. Raul claimed the trip took about 20 minutes, but there was a 15-minute gap in his timeline that he refused to explain. Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they drove straight to work without stopping. Nevertheless, the detectives remained skeptical about the unaccounted 15 minutes and Raul's suspicious behavior. Raul Ponce Rocha, the manager of El Tequila Salsa, had raised suspicions due to the cuts on his hands, which he claimed were from working with knives. However, there was not enough evidence to detain him at that point. Further investigation revealed that on May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee had exited the back door of the restaurant, and at the same time, only one person had approached the trash bins. This led to the quick identification of the suspect, who was surprisingly Raul Ponce Rocha, not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez as initially suspected. A search warrant was obtained for Raul's home, and the search uncovered some peculiar items. Under his mattress, investigators found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove similar to the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag, and a strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. All the evidence pointed to Brianna. It was only a matter of time before the test results confirmed the match. Raul was eventually arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned when he learned that a suspect had been identified in the brutal crime. He had trouble believing that his co-worker, Raul Ponce Rocha, could be capable of such a heinous act. What motivated Raul to commit this crime, especially since he barely knew Brianna? Sebastian's impression of Raul was that he was a friendly and harmless person. The mystery began to unravel in 2011 when Raul stood trial. Despite a lengthy investigation, Raul consistently denied any involvement in the crime and never admitted guilt. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence that contradicted his claims. Raul's DNA was found on several key pieces of evidence, including the iron, knives, a plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. A shoe print at the crime scene also matched Raul's shoes. The evidence pieced together the events of May 2, 2009. On his way to work that day, Raul passed by Brianna's house, a place that had long fascinated him. Assuming she was out, since her car was not in the driveway, he took advantage of the opportunity to break into her apartment and take what he wanted. Raul had a disturbing habit of collecting women's underwear, with evidence found hidden under his mattress. On the day of the incident, Raul left work, supposedly to pick up his friend Luciano, but instead entered Brianna's apartment without warning. He easily gained entry, suggesting he may have had a key, and went directly to Brianna's room, where he began rummaging through her belongings. When Brianna confronted him, Raul was likely caught off guard and feared being recognized. Panicked, he grabbed the nearest object, an iron, and used it to strike her. He then escalated the violence by slashing her throat with a knife and inflicting multiple other injuries. The investigation found that the killer appeared to take pleasure in the brutal act, as evidenced by the numerous and excessive wounds inflicted on the victim. The attacker also used multiple knives during the assault. After committing the crime, Raul attempted to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, which was likely stained with blood. He then calmly returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, and drove Luciano to the restaurant as planned. Raul took advantage of the lunch break to dispose of the evidence bag in a trash bin, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. Before the trial, Raul admitted to meeting with Brianna but claimed he didn't kill her. However, he suspected someone else might have and named a former restaurant employee. Raul stated that he saw this acquaintance, Sergio, at Brianna's house on the day she died. This confirmed that Raul had indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when Raul left, Sergio stayed behind and had an argument with Brianna. Raul's statement raised more questions and led to further investigations. The authorities verified the information and managed to contact Sergio, who was abroad at the time. Sergio appeared at the trial and testified that he was not involved in Brianna's death. He proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime, as he had left weeks earlier to care for his ill father in Mexico. It became clear that Raul had hoped to falsely accuse Sergio and create doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed, and Raul's actions showed that he had no qualms about accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime, and he felt no remorse for his actions. The trial of Raul Ponce Rocha drew a large crowd, including Brianna's family members and her friends Sebastian and Hugo. The young men struggled to keep their emotions in check, prompting officers to intervene multiple times to restore calm. In the end, Raul was found guilty of murdering Brianna Schneller and burglary, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at a correctional facility in Wisconsin. After the verdict, Brianna's father expressed his gratitude that justice had been served. He shared that he still keeps a Father's Day card Brianna gave him and cherishes every memory of her. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Sarah Foxwell. Sarah Foxwell was born on May 18, 1998, in Salisbury, Maryland, into a large family with 2 sisters and 4 brothers. Her mother had 3 additional children from a previous marriage. After her parents divorced, Sarah's mother struggled to care for her children alone. She worked long hours, so the children often stayed with relatives. As the middle child, Sarah played a peacemaking role, usually managing to bring her siblings together despite their frequent arguments. In December 2009, 11-year-old Sarah temporarily moved in with her aunt and grandparents, who lived in a spacious farmhouse on the outskirts of Salisbury. The kids loved visiting their aunt's home, which offered plenty of room to play. On December 22, 2009, the whole family was filled with joy and excitement, eagerly awaiting the upcoming Christmas day. After a pizza dinner, they began getting ready for bed around 9 p.m. Sarah shared a room with her 6-year-old sister, Emma, at the end of the hallway near the back door. The sisters chatted for a bit before falling asleep. The next morning, Sarah's grandfather went to wake the kids, but only found Emma in the room. He searched the entire house, thinking Sarah might have already gotten up, but couldn't find her anywhere. He informed Sarah's aunt, and together they thoroughly searched every room and corner of the house. When they couldn't find Sarah, her aunt suggested she might have gone outside to play in the snow, but her shoes and jacket were still at home. Then, her aunt noticed that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from the bathroom. After searching the surrounding area and finding no Sarah, her aunt called Sarah's mother, who rushed over. They then contacted the police, who arrived quickly and began searching the house. Sarah's aunt explained that she always checked the doors and windows every night before bed, including the previous evening, and the police couldn't find any signs of Sarah inside or nearby. When they learned about the missing toothbrush, the officers considered the possibility of an abduction, thinking the kidnapper might have taken the toothbrush before leaving with Sarah. They then decided to verify if all the doors and windows were indeed locked as Sarah's aunt had claimed. As investigators approached the back door next to Sarah's room, they found it unlocked, despite her aunt's insistence that it had been locked the night before. This discovery raised suspicions, since the family kept a spare key outside, which was now missing. The fact that the perpetrator knew about the spare key shows that he was very familiar with this family. Furthermore, the family's dog, which normally barked at strangers, had remained silent that night. The police launched a massive search operation, fearing that Sarah might have been kidnapped. News of her disappearance spread quickly, prompting many local residents to contact the police and offer their assistance. The police chief has made a public appeal through the media, asking people to check their cameras for any suspicious activity. Dozens of local police officers joined the search, with assistance from neighboring town police departments and police from other states. The police were hopeful that they would find Sarah alive, as the perpetrator had taken her toothbrush, which could indicate that they intended to keep her alive. With this in mind, the police dedicated all their resources to the search. Outside the house, investigators found their first clue, fresh tire tracks in the snow, suggesting the kidnapper had arrived by car. Since Sarah's warm clothing was still at home, it was unlikely the kidnapper had taken her on foot. Meanwhile, at the police station, Sarah's family was in for a surprise. Her 6-year-old sister, Emma, who shared a room with Sarah, whispered to their grandmother that she had seen the person who took Sarah. Emma claimed she had woken up to a man talking to Sarah, but pretended to be asleep, unsure of what was happening. She then saw the man leave the room with Sarah. What Emma said next sent shockwaves through the family. She knew the man who took Sarah. It was Mr. Thomas, the ex-boyfriend of Sarah's aunt. A man named Thomas had a history of violence against women and girls. Despite his criminal record, he spent a lot of time at Aunt Sarah's house and the children got to know him. The police knew Thomas well because he had many criminal records. Thomas first went to prison at 18 for attacking a 12-year-old girl, but he was released early after just a few months. He was sentenced again for assaulting another minor, but he was released early once more, this time after serving 6 months due to good behavior. Thomas continued to exhibit violent behavior, including another assault for which he received a 6-month sentence. He also tried to assault a girl on the same day his wife returned home from the hospital with their newborn baby. His wife eventually divorced him and obtained a restraining order after he threatened to kill her and their daughter. In another disturbing incident, Thomas targeted 2 young girls sitting on a porch. He approached them, claiming he had been watching one of them play in the yard, and called her a wild girl. He then used a stick to hit her on the buttocks, prompting her to run inside and tell her mother about the attack. She recognized Thomas from the window and recalled seeing his face before she moved into the house. She had previously checked the local sex offender registry and found his photo listed. She immediately reported him to the police, and the case proceeded to court. However, Thomas avoided punishment for his actions. Before the trial, she was threatened not to mention that Thomas was a sex offender and had a previous conviction for sexual assault. A few months prior to Sarah's disappearance, Thomas was arrested again for breaking into a 24-year-old woman's bedroom at night, undressing, and masturbating beside her bed. He was released on bail after his arrest. Initially, Thomas hid his criminal past from Sarah's aunt, but she eventually discovered the truth. Despite this, Thomas managed to persuade her that the accusations against him were false and that he was innocent. Detectives are certain that Thomas was the person who kidnapped Sarah. This suspicion was reinforced by the fact that during his relationship with Sarah's aunt, he had spent an inordinate amount of time with Sarah, more so than with the other children in the household. At the time, this behavior didn't seem unusual, but now that Sarah is missing, it appears highly suspicious. To further investigate, the police visited Thomas's residence, a shed located on his parents' property just a few miles away. They brought him in for questioning and obtained a search warrant for the shed. Upon searching, they found it to be in disarray with poor living conditions, but no evidence linking Thomas to Sarah's disappearance was discovered. However, the police did find a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs, which filled the shed. During the interrogation, Thomas denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He claimed that he was struggling with his own personal issues, specifically his tendency to commit crimes against underage girls. According to Thomas, he had made a conscious effort to avoid being alone with the children while dating Sarah's aunt in order to avoid any false accusations. When confronted with Emma's testimony, which placed him at the scene of the abduction, Thomas dismissed her account, stating that she had a history of fabricating stories and that he was not there on the night in question. Detectives were skeptical of Thomas's story. It wasn't just because of his prior convictions. As they questioned him about 11-year-old Sarah's disappearance, Thomas seemed to take pleasure in the situation, smiling and mocking the sheriff. Although it is certain that he planned the crime without any mistakes, the police still work hard to solve the case and find out the truth about what really happened. Thomas claimed to have a solid alibi, stating he was at a bar with a friend until late at night. However, investigators found a discrepancy in his story. Although he was indeed at the bar, he left around 1 a.m. and wasn't seen again until 7 a.m. the next morning. A review of his phone records revealed that he had sent messages to several women, proposing to meet up, but all of them declined. Despite the inconsistencies in Thomas's story, detectives still couldn't gather enough evidence to incriminate him. Their primary concern was finding Sarah, and they poured all their resources into the search. A search of Thomas's pickup truck yielded several crucial clues. Inside, they found Sarah's green toothbrush and a large lollipop, which suggested that Thomas might have used the candy to lure her into his vehicle. Furthermore, the tire tracks on his truck matched the ones found in the snow outside the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. Thomas had lied about not visiting Aunt Sarah's house for more than a month. This did not deter the police and volunteers from continuing their search for Sarah. They searched extensively, covering many miles around her house, checking abandoned buildings, forests, ravines, and bodies of water. K-9 units and helicopters assisted in the search. The community provided immense support to the police efforts, with hundreds signing up to volunteer. The poor weather and upcoming holidays did not dampen the search, but unfortunately, the efforts yielded no results. The search party resumed early the next morning, with their numbers increasing rather than dwindling. Eventually, the number of volunteers swelled to 3,000 people. Due to the sheer volume of volunteers, the coordination center had to be relocated from the police station to a larger venue, the local baseball stadium. Many of the volunteers brought their children to assist, handing out essentials such as water, hot tea, and food. Despite the odds, the search continued with renewed determination to find Sarah alive. While investigators were questioning Thomas, they received another crucial piece of evidence. After he was brought to the station, his clothes were sent to the lab for analysis. Experts discovered foreign DNA on Thomas's underwear, which they compared to a DNA sample from Sarah's belongings. The results showed a complete match, leading detectives to a disturbing conclusion. It appeared that Thomas had sexually assaulted Sarah after abducting her. Despite the lack of progress in the search, thousands of people gathered on Christmas Day, December 25th, to continue looking for Sarah. Meanwhile, investigators obtained GPS data from Thomas's phone, which showed the cell towers his phone had connected to, although the exact locations were not provided. Police discovered that on the night Sarah vanished, her phone had connected to 3 cell towers, allowing them to narrow down the search area to a roughly triangular zone. Investigators focused on this location, located near the state border, about 8 miles from Sarah's aunt's home. The area was densely wooded, but hundreds of people thoroughly searched every inch of the territory, holding out hope for a Christmas miracle that Sarah would be found alive. Sadly, the outcome was far more tragic. Around 4 p.m., police discovered Sarah's body on the ground, near the state border. She was lying on her back with her arms raised upwards, pointing towards the sky. Medical experts performed an autopsy and were shocked by what they discovered. They confirmed that Sarah had been sexually assaulted and showed signs of strangulation. Additionally, experts found dirt in Sarah's lungs, suggesting that the perpetrator had attempted to drown her in a puddle. During this torture, Sarah lost consciousness. The experts also found evidence that Sarah had suffered severe burns. It is believed that the perpetrator may have left her lying in the forest for some time, went to get gasoline, and then returned to set Sarah on fire. Significantly, traces of smoke were found in her lungs, indicating that she was still alive when the fire was set. This also explains why her hands were raised and pointing to the sky. Likely a reflex reaction to the fire. The sheer cruelty of these actions shocked and horrified everyone involved in the case, including the detectives. After reconstructing the case, the investigators' main goal is to ensure that the perpetrator, Thomas, receives the death penalty. Thomas continued to deny any involvement in Sarah's disappearance, but the evidence against him was substantial. After discovering Sarah's body, forensic experts found several strands of hair and pieces of fabric from Sarah's pajamas on the front seat of Thomas's pickup truck, further linking him to her kidnapping. Based on all the evidence, it is very unlikely that Thomas will escape punishment. The trial was delayed for over a year, but it never took place. In early 2011, the prosecution offered Thomas a plea deal. Under the terms of the agreement, Thomas would plead guilty and receive a life sentence, rather than facing the death penalty. While this deal may seem lenient considering Thomas's crimes, there were valid reasons for accepting it. A key consideration was that Sarah's younger sister would have to testify multiple times in court, facing the man who had murdered her sister. Sarah's kidnapping and murder were devastating for her family, and there was a risk that the trial's outcome might not bring them the justice they sought. Due to uncertainty about securing the death penalty, the prosecution presented a plea deal. This deal meant that Thomas would not receive the death penalty, and in return, he would plead guilty to the crime. The terms of the deal also ensured that Thomas would not be eligible for early release from prison. Another issue was that the state governor at the time opposed the death penalty. Ultimately, Thomas agreed to the deal and confessed to the detectives, revealing details they already knew. He admitted to tricking Sarah into leaving her house with him, then taking her away, sexually assaulting her, and killing her. As a result, Thomas received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum security prison. During his initial days in prison, Thomas was assaulted by a fellow inmate with a homemade weapon during lunch, resulting in several severe lacerations. Despite the attack, Thomas survived and was later given increased protection by prison staff. The public was outraged by Sarah's case, which exposed repeated failures in Thomas's custody, allowing him to be released but continue to commit crimes. Hello friends, Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Anderson. In 2010, 19-year-old Amanda Anderson resided with her family in New Chapel Hill, Texas, a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people, approximately 100 miles from Dallas. The events that unfolded in her life shocked not only her family, but also everyone who became aware of the details of this case. The incident instilled fear in the community, causing residents who previously felt safe enough to leave their front doors unlocked at night to change their habit. Amanda Elizabeth Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. She graduated with honors from Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. At the time of her death, Amanda was employed by Trinity Mother Francis and was a student at Tyler Junior College, where she was majoring in English literature. With a passion for writing, music, and life, Amanda had a bright future ahead of her. Tragically, her life was cut short on September 15, 2010, leaving her family to face the devastating consequences. Amanda was found dead at the family home in New Chapel Hill. Her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson, made a 911 call after returning home and discovering a shock. In his conversation with the dispatcher, Nate explained that he had been doing homework but was getting stressed because he couldn't find the answers to his questions, so he decided to take a quick jog in the nearby woods, a routine he followed occasionally. When he returned, he found the garage door had been kicked open. Nate began by searching his own room, then moved on to Amanda's room. It was only afterwards that he stumbled upon his sister's lifeless body lying on the floor. A horrific discovery. When the dispatcher inquired about the front or back door being kicked in, Nate clarified that it was actually the garage door that had been forced open, likely because it was the most commonly used entrance. Nate was crying, and the dispatcher asked him to calm down, explaining that police and his parents were on their way. The dispatcher then asked if Nate had touched anything in the house, and he said no. About 2 minutes into their conversation, Nate explained to the dispatcher how he'd found Amanda, describing a bullet hole and stating his belief that there were a couple of them in her head. When the investigators arrived at the crime scene, Nate recounted the same details he had provided to the dispatcher during the 911 call. He explained that he had returned home to find his door kicked open, and to his horror, discovered his deceased sister. Overwhelmed with grief, Nate was inconsolable, crying almost continuously as he struggled to come to terms with the shocking fact that someone had shot and killed his sister. During the crime scene examination, the criminologist determined that Amanda was seated on her bed in her bedroom when she was shot, causing her to fall to the floor. The absence of a crime weapon and shell casings at the scene suggests that the perpetrator either removed the casings before fleeing or used a revolver, which would not eject casings. Amanda's parents were devastated when they learned what had happened to their daughter. As deeply religious people, they struggled to comprehend how anyone could commit such an act against someone as innocent and kind-hearted as Amanda, who had only recently graduated from high school and was still figuring out her path in life. She was a gentle soul who wished no harm to anyone and had no enemies. Nate's grandparents recalled that his world was shattered the day Amanda died. He was overcome with grief in the police car, sobbing uncontrollably, and they had to extract him and cradle him in their arms. According to them, Nate had an extraordinary love and devotion for his sister, and discovering her in such a distressed state was utterly unbearable. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather more information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, those interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit and religious family. One neighbor offered his theory about what might have happened to Amanda. According to him, the area was previously quiet and crime-free, but about 2 weeks prior to Amanda's death, a house in the area was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in what happened to Amanda, and that they saw Nate Anderson go out for a run. The perpetrator might have then broken into the Andersons' house, and Amanda might have stumbled upon the scene, becoming a witness. This could be why the robber decided to kill her. To determine if Amanda's death was connected to an attempted robbery, the investigators required evidence. When caught by homeowners, robbers will often take drastic measures to prevent them from notifying the police. However, in this instance, nothing was stolen from the Anderson family home. Despite the opportunity, the perpetrator left Amanda's room untouched, with valuables like jewelry and a laptop remaining in place, unaffected by the intruder. Amanda's father, Mark, conducted a thorough search of the house and reported to the investigators that nothing was missing. Given this, the investigators began to question whether they were dealing with a robbery gone wrong. They found it puzzling that an intruder who broke into the house to steal valuables and encountered Amanda would feel the need to shoot her multiple times. This led them to suspect that the motive behind the crime was not robbery. Amanda's room was not the only area the forensics team scrutinized for clues. They conducted a thorough search of the entire house, gathering fingerprints and hair samples in the hopes of finding traces left by someone who didn't live there. Additionally, they collected Nate's clothing as evidence, given that he was the first to discover Amanda's body. Although an initial inspection of Nate's clothes revealed no signs of blood, consistent with his 911 call assertion that he hadn't touched anything, the police still submitted his garments to the lab for analysis, along with other evidence. This was a standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects. The investigators requested that Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, reveal all the weapons present in the house. As was common in Texas, the Anderson family possessed an array of guns. Although they weren't enthusiastic hunters, they occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark Anderson's directions, the police discovered the weapons and confiscated over 10 distinct types of pistols and rifles, as well as multiple revolvers, from the residence. The police initially considered the possibility of criminal gang activity as a potential motive for the crime, but they quickly ruled it out since they had no suspects and the motive remained unclear. Additionally, their informants did not provide any useful leads. On September 17, 2010, Amanda's family struggled to come to terms with the devastating loss they had suffered. Meanwhile, investigators worked to identify those responsible for the crime. 2 days later, the police received the autopsy results, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, with all 4 wounds located in the head. What was unusual about the attack was that each shot would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator did not stop after the first shot and instead pulled the trigger 3 more times. The placement of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head was particularly noteworthy. The perpetrator used a small caliber pistol and fired multiple shots. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, another was near the right temple, and the 4th was directly on the forehead. All the wounds, except for the one on the right temple, showed a top-to-bottom trajectory. The exception, the right temple wound, had a bullet that entered at a 90-degree angle. These unusual wound patterns suggested that Amanda's death was more akin to an execution. Amanda's death was caused by .22 caliber bullets. Since there were no gunpowder marks around her head wounds, it's clear the shooter was at least a yard away. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe Amanda was familiar with her killer. They based this conclusion on 2 key facts. Firstly, Amanda was using her laptop while sitting on her bed when she was shot, implying she felt comfortable and didn't perceive a threat. Secondly, the shooter was standing right next to her. If Amanda didn't know the person, she would have likely reacted to their presence, but instead, she did nothing, suggesting she trusted the perpetrator and didn't anticipate being shot. The investigators looked beyond the Anderson family home for answers to their questions. At Amanda's college, they spoke with her friends, among whom her best friend revealed that Amanda was not the type to interact with strangers, avoided illegal activities, and therefore did not have ties to the criminal underworld. Additionally, She did not have any enemies at college. But what if someone had been secretly watching Amanda and plotting against her? The investigators collaborated with college security to uncover any suspicious incidents involving Amanda or other students over the past year. But this avenue led nowhere. A week after Amanda's death, the police were still without a motive, suspects, or answers for her family. As the family grieved, the locals of New Chapel Hill lived in fear for their lives, desperate to uncover the truth behind the tragedy. Amanda's father, Mark Anderson, expressed his despair, saying he doubted whether there would be a wedding or his wife would get to experience her pregnancy together with their daughter, and all the joys that come with it. Shortly after, a reward was offered to anyone with information that could aid the investigation, in the hope that it would encourage someone who knew something to come forward and share their knowledge with the police. Shortly after, the police station began to receive calls offering tips, but most of these were speculative and ultimately hindered the investigation rather than helping it. The process of verifying all the incoming information was time-consuming, but unfortunately, it failed to yield the desired outcome. Each and every lead ultimately ended in a dead end. The police decided to re-interview the Anderson family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of wounds suggested a potentially personal motive for the crime. Amanda's mother was at a loss as to who could have committed such a heinous act, describing her daughter as a regular church attendee and an excellent student who always treated others with kindness. According to her mother, Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, although she had briefly seen someone around a year prior. However, the relationship had fizzled out, and as far as her mother knew, they had not been in contact since. The police wanted to track down this man to determine the nature of his relationship with Amanda, the reasons behind their breakup, and whether he had any motive to harm her. According to him, he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but he claimed they were never in a romantic relationship. They had gone out together on several occasions, but nothing more developed from it. When questioned about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that he had seen her the day before her death, and she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This was the extent of what the investigators learned, and it appeared to be another dead end. They decided to go back to the start and re-examine all the evidence, as it all began with Nate's 911 call. They focused on this call once again. In the conversation, Nate claimed he had not entered his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. When the dispatcher asked, "Does she have a bullet hole?" Nate responded, "There's not just one. I think there are a couple in her head." When the investigators responded to the crime scene following Nate's call, they were met with a horrific sight. Despite their experience in handling similar cases, even they were initially uncertain that Amanda had been shot multiple times. Furthermore, there was no trace of a crime weapon or shell casings at the scene, which raised a crucial question. How had Nate determined that his sister had been shot multiple times in the first place? The investigators determined that it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to see that Amanda had been shot in the head, or to know how many times she was shot. After returning to the Anderson house, the officers inspected the door, which Nate claimed was forced open when he got home. Although they found some scratches on the door, the lock was not damaged, leading the police to conclude that someone was trying to make it seem like the door had been kicked open. The crime lab examined all the weapons found at the Anderson house and determined that one of the .22 caliber pistols was likely the one used to shoot Amanda. Although they couldn't eliminate the possibility that this pistol was the murder weapon, the investigators drew a surprising conclusion after reviewing all the available evidence. It appeared that Amanda was killed by someone within her own family. The pistol had been hidden in a secure location, indicating that the killer was familiar with its whereabouts. Furthermore, the killer had returned the weapon to its original hiding place on the night of the crime. Amanda's father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. At the time, only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate were in the house. Given the circumstances, all the evidence suggested that Nate Anderson was responsible. However, the question remained, what could have driven him to take their father's gun and ultimately to take his sister's life? The investigators took a closer look at what happened that evening. Mark Anderson recalled that he phoned his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and told him that someone had shot him. It transpired that, before calling 911, Nate had initially called his father to inform him and his mother of the devastating news that their son had killed their daughter. The police required concrete evidence before making any charges, as they didn't want to cause Amanda and Nate's parents further distress. The investigators decided to interview Mark Anderson without making any accusations against his son. When asked if Nate had recently used the .22 caliber pistol, Mark replied that just a few days before Amanda's death, he had handed the pistol over to Nate and that Nate had fired it in the backyard. Upon returning to the Anderson house, the officers found several .22 caliber casings in the backyard, which matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. 2 weeks after Amanda's death, a crucial discovery was made that eliminated all doubts. The clothing Nate wore on the day he found his sister's body was submitted to a laboratory for luminol testing. The test results revealed the presence of blood stains on his clothes. A leading national blood spatter expert was called in to assist the investigators in Smith County, and together they concluded that Nate Anderson was either present in the room when the shooting took place, or that he himself fired the fatal shots. The test results revealed that Nate's clothes were stained with his sister's blood. Despite being typical siblings, the police were baffled as to what could have driven Nate to shoot Amanda. The investigation aimed to uncover the reason behind this uncharacteristic act of violence. Family photos of Amanda and Nate Anderson depicted a strong bond of friendship and affection, which their parents corroborated, describing their children as a loving Christian brother and sister who always got along. On November 10, 2010, police obtained an arrest warrant for Nate Anderson, which led them to apprehend him at a church. He was accused of murdering his own sister. The news sent shockwaves through the community, with everyone familiar with the case struggling to comprehend how Nate could commit such a heinous crime. The trial commenced on October 24, 2011, marking the beginning of a long and emotionally charged journey for all involved, especially the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against the teenager, his family members remained steadfast in their support, adamant that he was innocent of Amanda's murder. Nate was prosecuted as an adult despite an expert's opinion that it would be in his best interest to remain in the juvenile court system. The judge overruled this opinion. During the trial, the state presented some of the evidence found in the Anderson home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors revealed that Nate's computer had a history of accessing adult websites and contained drawings with violent content. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned shooting Nathan. When her friend asked why, Amanda responded that it was because Nathan would shoot large staples at her head and never assisted with household chores. An expert testified that a discovery about Nate helped establish a possible motive for the crime. However, Nate's lawyer argued that the evidence presented was not unusual. Ultimately, in February 2012, Nate Anderson accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. Prior to his plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. He revealed that he shot her with a pistol from their home. In a joint statement, Mark and Stacy Anderson, Nate and Amanda's parents, expressed their emotional response to the confession. Mark said, "Nate asked for my forgiveness, and I forgave him." Stacy added, "As a mother who loves both her children, this has been the most difficult experience of my life." The court has sentenced Nate Anderson to a 20-year prison term, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. According to Nate's attorney, accepting the plea agreement was in his best interest. The attorney stressed that neither Nate nor his family ever wanted the case to go to trial. When asked about the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorney refused to elaborate, saying only that Nate had shown remorse and had received forgiveness. The attorney, Brett Harrison, added that there had been many difficult conversations and tears. He stated that the incident was clearly a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. The Smith County Sheriff's Office stated that Nate was eligible to apply for parole 2 years ago, but unfortunately, they were unable to find any information regarding whether he did so. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. On July 5, 2005, around 8 a.m. on Deck 7, in one of the cabins of the Royal Caribbean cruise ship, 16-year-old Emily Rausch of Chicago was preparing for a new sunny day. Outside her cabin window, Emily noticed something strange that caused her alarm. She saw what appeared to be blood smeared across the canopy that served as a cover for the nearby lifeboat. She also saw a blood stain near the very edge of the canopy, as if someone who had been injured had fallen there before disappearing overboard. Emily could not remain indifferent to this discovery and hastened to report the strange sighting to the staff of the liner. George Smith was a cheerful, inquisitive, and bright young man. He was born in the small town of Greenwich, Connecticut, and his childhood was a happy one, filled with the joy and support of his family, which came first for George. He always maintained a close relationship with his parents and his sister, Bree. His father, George Smith Sr., owned a liquor store and ran it himself. The family business was not just a job for him, but a true passion. In 2000, the younger George Smith successfully completed his higher education in business at Bedford College, which is located in Massachusetts. After graduation, he worked for several years in Boston as a computer data mining analyst. However, his heart has always belonged to the family business. After making an informed decision, George decided to return home to help his parents run the store under his father's guidance. He was going to learn the ins and outs of the family business so that he could take over the store in the future and allow his parents to enjoy a well-deserved vacation. In 2002, at one of his reunions with friends, George Smith met a girl who became his life partner. Jennifer was also a Connecticut native and had just received a job offer as an elementary school teacher. She was bright, beautiful, and ambitious, just like George himself. The young couple were completely infatuated with each other, and George's parents were also delighted with his chosen partner. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26 years old, the couple decided to get married and start a new chapter of their lives. They celebrated their wedding at the Castle Hill Inn, located in the picturesque town of Newport, Rhode Island, and the ceremony itself took place on the ocean front. It was a location perfect for such an important event in their lives. Immediately after the ceremony, the newlyweds went on a honeymoon, choosing a cruise on a luxury liner, one of the grand ships of the Royal Caribbean fleet. The 12-day tour involved sailing the beautiful waters of the Asian Sea. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29th and included stops along the French Riviera and the Italian coastline. George and Jennifer soon befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Asen from California. The 20-year-old Josh, a man with a lively sense of humor, quickly won over George's friendship, and the lively group enjoyed spending time together. On the 1st of July, when the cruise ship departed the Italian coast, they decided to go ashore and have fun all day. On July 4th, the young people explored the island, walked through the narrow streets of the old town, swam in the crystal-clear sea, and savored the local cuisine and cozy taverns. Happy and cheerful, they relished each other's company and the enchanting ambiance of this beautiful place. Mykonos left indelible memories in their hearts, and they planned to continue the evening's enjoyment together on the deck of the ship after a romantic dinner. George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the cruise ship. The merry group decided to come together and have an enjoyable, memorable experience in this exotic part of the world. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After indulging in delicious appetizers and drinks, the newly married couple, accompanied by Josh Askin, went to have fun at the casino on the ship. George and Josh enjoyed sitting at the craps table, and they were entertained during the game, while Jennifer played at the poker table. By the end of the evening, the newlyweds had lost a considerable amount of money. Without regret, they joked about the loss, as it was their honeymoon after all. After the casino closed, apparently the friends decided to continue their night out. The last video of George was recorded around 2:30 a.m. on one of the liner's many security cameras. The footage showed him leaving the casino, but that did not mean George would return to his cabin. In the early morning hours of June 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos, a mysterious plot began to unfold. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed who was on a Mediterranean cruise with his wife Jennifer, disappeared last night. George was reportedly having an active time enjoying the liner's atmosphere of fun and luxury. Everything seemed harmless that night, but the sequel turned out to be much darker. The captain of the ship examined the cabin under the window of which strange footprints had been found, as well as the place on the deck. There was no one in the cabin, and the available footprints and evidence indicated that something serious had happened. The possible disappearance of the newlyweds was related to violence. The news quickly reached all the liner visitors. There was alarm aboard the ship, and passengers were disturbed by the strange events. Deck 7 was cordoned off, and no one was let in or out of their cabins. The ship's crew thoroughly checked every possible establishment on the liner in hopes of finding the missing George and Jennifer. After the discovery of blood, the newlyweds were presumed to have mysteriously disappeared. Taking the situation into his own hands, the senior officer headed to their stateroom to get to the bottom of what was going on. From all available traces, it was hypothesized that George might have fallen overboard the ship. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ship, the search for the young couple was still going on. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in the ship's spa, where she was having a pre-booked massage session. Her facial expression spoke of deep surprise and concern. She claimed to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she had not seen him since the previous night. Jennifer revealed that when she woke up this morning, her husband wasn't there. At first, it did not seem unusual to her because he had spent the night with friends, and in the morning he was in another cabin, so she did not search for her husband but went for a spa treatment without being bothered by his absence. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation. The ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers and announced that the abnormal events required cooperation with local authorities. He emphasized that it was a necessary measure to clarify the circumstances and expressed hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police officers began their questioning with the missing man's wife, Jennifer. Her agitated state and apparent lack of information about her husband made her the main suspect. She said that she had not seen George since the previous night, and that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had shown up at her door, announcing that her husband may have fallen overboard the ship. They also noticed traces of blood on the boat's awning, after which there was no room for doubt that something terrible had happened to George. Investigators scrutinized cabin 962 on the cruise ship. This cabin was a mess, perhaps the result of a hurried search or even a struggle in the bathroom. Small drops of blood were found on the carpet and towel, and there were fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators also found 2 small blood stains on the bedding, each about 2 centimeters long. These samples were identified, and the blood belonged to George. All evidence indicated that George had been traumatized inside the cabin before his mysterious disappearance. The investigators' attention was drawn to a chair on the balcony that had been moved, allowing someone to sit next to the railing. Marks on the railing suggested that someone had sat on it. This raised suspicion among many, including the ship's captain, that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the height of the railing and the presence of blood on the boat's awning and inside the cabin also raised suspicion of a murder that had occurred. Investigators began reconstructing the sequence of events that night, trying to figure out who George was spending time with and what might have led to this tragedy. The investigation was just beginning, but it was already obvious that they were facing a complex and dark story full of mysteries and unexpected twists and turns. When the Turkish authorities entered the ship to begin investigating the disappearance of George Smith, they decided to start by questioning the company of boys with whom the newlyweds had spent time the previous night. The situation remained mysterious, and every detail could be important in solving the mystery. Members of the company revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed an excessive amount of alcohol on the tragic night. According to them, George was heavily intoxicated, and they assisted him in returning to his cabin, where they put him to bed, removed his shoes, and left him alone. They also reported that they were unable to locate Jennifer and assumed that she had returned to the cabin at a later time. However, there are several inconsistencies in Josh Askin's testimony. Specifically, he claimed that he saw Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd. Josh believed they had a passionate connection and did not hide their feelings even in George's presence. But video footage showed that at 3:30 a.m., Jennifer stumbled away, leaving George with her new friends, and Lloyd's keycard data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., which was confirmed by his girlfriend, whom he woke up upon entering the cabin. These discrepancies raised further questions for investigators and led them to believe that Josh Askin may have had his own motives for withholding important details. The investigation continued, and each new detail added more and more mystery to the story. Greg Rosenberg, a young man of 19, was enjoying a cruise on a minor with his family and friends. In this company were his cousin Zach Rosenberg and a close friend, Rostislav Kaufman. All three, despite their Russian roots, held American passports and lived in New York City. Things began in the casino, where Jennifer and Greg Rosenberg decided to try their luck at poker. The mutual gambling lasted until late at night, and when the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., the group of guys decided to continue the fun together. They headed to the disco, continuing to dance and enjoy alcohol. Lloyd Botha, the casino manager, was also spotted in their company. He joined in the fun as the young men continued their nightly entertainment. Next, the events of the night, as described by the witnesses, begin to diverge as the individual members of the group gradually disperse and return to their cabins. By this time, it was already late at night, and they were visibly intoxicated and rowdy. According to the rules of order on the ship, it was decided to deny service to those who were being loud and behaving inappropriately. When the staff of the liner refused to serve the two drunken visitors, the young people recalled that they had purchased a bottle of absinthe during their walk on the island of Mykonos. However, crews and passengers were forbidden from consuming their own alcohol at a certain point. At a certain point, Josh returns to his cabin, which was on the same deck, to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe that he said he had plans for. As it later turns out, the absinthe was unusually strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decides to help his friend and hides the bottle behind the waistband of his shorts. After 3 in the morning, when the ocean liner had already become completely quiet, an attentive janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh, and George, were drinking their bottle of absinthe. This circumstance did not go unnoticed, and it became another element in the investigation. However, it wasn't just the men who were drunk that evening. Jennifer, who had initially appeared relatively sober and calm, began to exhibit noticeable changes in her behavior as the evening progressed. She started to stagger, and at one point, even leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. The witnesses had varying interpretations of her actions. Some believed she was trying to maintain her balance, while others perceived it as flirtatious behavior. The subsequent events between the young couple also remain unclear. According to the witnesses, there was a conflict between the couple. It is possible that they were simply discussing the previous evening, either jokingly or seriously, but at some point, Jennifer struck George. However, it is unclear whether this was done in a playful manner or out of anger. After that, Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., appearing intoxicated and unsteady on her feet, leaving George with his new friends. This was a pivotal moment that night. The testimony of staff witnesses proved crucial in uncovering the details of the incident. Jennifer, walking and staggering down the hallway, drew the attention of the janitor, who had earlier observed the young men consuming absinthe. He provided her assistance, helped her to the elevator, and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, there was a peculiar discrepancy. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was later found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to get her back to her quarters. When they got there, the clock was already showing 4:52 a.m., but George wasn't there. The curtains on the balcony doors were drawn tightly, and they remained stationary even with the breeze. This raised questions. Was George able to go out to the balcony on his own after his new friends left him in bed? Deputy Chief of Police Chit Heyman and his wife were resting in a nearby cabin and witnessed the unfolding events. The couple had been asleep for some time, but around 4 a.m., they were suddenly awakened by a noise on their floor. They first heard loud noises from stateroom number 9062, where the newlyweds were staying. Chit Heyman immediately called guest services to report the noise. He also pounded on the wall and yelled to his neighbors, which resulted in a brief silence. Then there was loud talking again, lasting about 3 minutes, and suddenly there was a loud argument on the balcony. Chit and his wife heard someone say, "Good night," several times, as if trying to get people to leave the cabin. This was followed by sounds of moving furniture and finally a loud thud, like an object falling. Chit Heyman decided to investigate and open the door. He saw 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing loud noises, like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream, but none of the eyewitnesses had definitive proof that a woman was in the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 were visible as they exited. The question arose, could one of them have stayed inside, trying to steal money from the newlyweds, who may have had winnings from gambling in the casino? The theory about a failed robbery attempt seems the most plausible. However, there are alibis for the 3 men, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, who were allegedly in another stateroom just minutes after Chit Heyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirmed that the boys entered it at 4:05 a.m. according to their testimony, and that they entered the cabin again was not recorded. Thus, there are several theories as to what may have happened to George Smith. Theory 1. Robbery. The theory of a possible robbery represents one of the main ones. By all appearances, George and Jennifer got drunk fairly quickly that night, but from witnesses' observations, they looked more or less sober when they left the casino at 2:30 in the morning. At 3:30 a.m., however, they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting possible exposure to illegal substances. This theory is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors who claim that George and Jennifer spoke openly about having large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings. Different witnesses mentioned different amounts, but they all estimated their wealth to be in the tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, they could have been victims of a robbery. George wore an expensive Breitling watch, and Jennifer owned an expensive engagement ring, which indicated that they were wealthy. Maybe their quarters were turned over looking for that money. The traces of blood on the sheet could probably have come from the kidnapper's attempt to remove George's valuable watch from his wrist. The second theory of events is related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain, upon learning of the drunkenness of the passengers and the footprints on the balcony, concluded that there may have been an unintentional accident, and for example, during the scuffle, George fell overboard. Particular attention is paid to the question of the presence of hallucinations and their potential danger due to the ingestion of absinthe. Experts in the field of toxicology emphasize that everything depends on the concentration of the active substance. Today, this drink is available for sale in many European countries, and its concentration is significantly limited by European Union regulations. This means that in officially sold absinthe, the concentration of thujone is so low that it is not capable of causing hallucinations. However, illegally made absinthe with a much higher concentration can be found on the black market, which in theory can cause hallucinations. This seems unlikely in this case, as the absinthe the Smith couple purchased was bought officially in Europe and could not have caused such effects, according to experts. To achieve hallucinogenic effects using official absinthe would require the consumption of a huge quantity, so large that it would hardly be tolerable for the body and would most likely lead to fatal alcohol intoxication. Thus, the theory about the influence of alcohol and hallucinogens, in this case, seems unlikely and lacks convincing evidence. FBI agents conducted polygraph interviews with several key individuals in this story, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, both of whom passed the polygraph successfully. However, Josh Askin failed the polygraph interview, which may indicate that he had some secrets regarding George's disappearance. But it is also possible that it was the result of special interrogation tactics used to get more information from him. There was also a videotape of 3 guys, including Russians, joking about what had happened. This tape proved to be important evidence, and the FBI agents took it into consideration. One of the unidentified guys on the tape uttered the phrase, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which may hint at some kind of incident or joke involving George. The George Smith investigation was also influenced by the testimony of Greg Rosenberg, who was among the young men who were in the company of those entertaining that night. He claimed that they ordered food to their cabin that day, which serves as a key alibi for the Russian boys. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as records in the ship's service logs do not support such orders, and the delivery service had been blocked for their cabin the day before. The staff was even instructed not to provide any service to them that night. Greg cannot say for sure which of the cabin's passengers placed the orders. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and his death also remains unsolved. Police are looking into a possible link between his murder and the death of George Smith. The mysterious appearance of George Smith became a real mystery that cast a shadow on his family, and the situation became more and more complicated. The behavior of the relatives after this tragedy attracted the attention of both the public and law enforcement agencies. The Smith family continued to press the authorities, demanding that the truth and justice be revealed. The case of George's disappearance was transferred from the FBI's Connecticut Regional Office to the FBI's New York office. Their persistence, and more importantly, their ability to get the public's attention through the media, yielded little results in trying to solve this dark secret. The family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find and punish those responsible. They also called for a boycott of the shipowner's company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to keep profits. The relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer, became strained after the incident. Jennifer's behavior was scrutinized publicly. She appeared overly composed, cautious in her responses, and her reluctance to provide sufficient information raised suspicion. Jennifer claimed she was following the instructions of FBI agents and acting as directed. The Smith family, in their search for justice and truth, eventually lost faith in Jennifer when she accepted an offer from the judgment to settle the lawsuit independently for $1 million. The family perceived this move as a betrayal and an attempt to escape further allegations against the cruise organizers. The Smith family was disappointed by the lack of transparency in the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They were convinced that Jennifer was hiding something and was not showing the proper interest in finding out what had happened. Jennifer herself claimed that she remembered almost nothing from that night after 2:30 a.m. and was not even aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation has not satisfied the Smith family and their belief in justice. Skeptical of the official findings, they decided to take justice into their own hands and enlisted the help of an independent forensic scientist, Henry. Lee Henry conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony, but the work was not included in the official investigation. These investigations could have revealed key information about what had happened and could have confirmed one of the two main versions of events: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes a fall from it unproven. It could have been the result of a third party pushing George or him being in some insane state. He could have climbed up on the chair by himself and fallen. Nevertheless, the latter version raised many questions and doubts. The expert intended to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the company owner of the liner refused this request. George's relatives claimed that this decision was made to hinder their attempts to establish the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations remained unavailable to the public. At the same time, the FBI stepped in and began conducting their own investigation, but many of their findings and discoveries also remained secret. The FBI's focus was on the 4 young men who spent the night with George, Josh Asen, and the 3 Russians, Greg Zak, Rosenberg, and Rusov Kaufman. Their testimony was largely inconsistent with that of the other witnesses, making the situation strange and confusing. The story of George Smith's disappearance continues to be a deep mystery shrouded in unknown circumstances, with a lengthy investigation and many theories. The Smith family and his loved ones continue to strive to find out the truth. They initially suspected Jennifer, but were then able to be convinced of her innocence and increased the payout amount of the lawsuit against the company. Despite the FBI's efforts and long investigations, they never found out what really happened or where George's body was located. Eventually, the case was closed and the incident was ruled an accident. The FBI determined that there was not enough evidence to continue the investigation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano's story began quite harmlessly. She was receiving attention from a work colleague which she consistently ignored. She sincerely hoped that her admirer would soon understand and just leave her alone. However, one careless action by Celeste drastically changed everything, turning her suitor into an obsessed pursuer. Another thoughtless act led to irreversible consequences. Celeste Cristano was born on November 30th, 1997, in the northeastern part of Melbourne in Victoria State, Australia. She was the youngest of 2 children to parents Eggy Darrow and Tony Mano. She grew up alongside her older brother named Alessandro. According to some accounts, their father left his wife when the children were still small and soon remarried. However, he always maintained contact with his older offspring, supported them financially, and tried to be actively involved in their lives. During her school years, Celeste was quite sociable, active, and friendly. She engaged in sports and dance, served as the captain of the cheerleading team, and had big plans for her future. Initially, she dreamed of becoming a lawyer and enrolled in the prestigious University of Melbourne, studying criminal and civil law. However, towards the end of her studies, she found law dull and began studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, she was hired by a large and rapidly growing company that sold various goods on e-commerce platforms. Smart and talented, Celeste quickly grasped everything on the fly. She successfully fulfilled her duties and rapidly ascended the career ladder. From a simple call center worker, she became the head of an entire department in less than 2 years. Considered one of the most promising employees, everyone admired her intelligence, initiative, and ability to organize work competently. Moreover, Celeste possessed outstanding external attributes and a flawless figure. During her university years, she even participated in the university beauty contest and was among the top 3 leaders. She always had many admirers from a young age, but was meticulous in choosing partners. Among her colleagues was Louis Sacco. He worked at the company nearly 16 years older than her and showed a lively interest in Celeste from her first days at the office. Worth noting is that Louis Sacco was quite reserved and unsociable, evidently lacking career ambitions, as he long occupied the same minor position without desire for development. Kind, smiling, and open, Celeste did not want to hurt Louis Sacco's feelings, so she always politely declined whenever he tried asking her out. Despite this, Lou repeatedly attempted to draw her attention in various ways. Sometimes Celeste would make jokes to lighten the mood, but firmly desired nothing to do with him. His attentions were persistent and awkwardly annoying, but keeping composure, Celeste hoped he would soon give up or shift his focus elsewhere as time passed. Louis Sacco remained relentless, becoming almost obsessed with the young beauty, Celeste Mano. Everyone around him noticed it. One day, Celeste confided in a close colleague that she wouldn't ever consider a relationship with Louis. First, he was odd and unpredictable. Second, she never felt any attraction towards men who lacked ambition and life goals. Third, the significant age gap also played a role. Nonetheless, she did pity him because despite all his efforts, he stood no chance. Unfortunately, Louis Sacco lost focus on his work in his fruitless attempts to win Celeste's attention and affection. Historically, he was a very hard-working employee, but now he completely ignored his job duties and his productivity suffered greatly. Senior management was unhappy with this drop in performance. Louis was given 3 reprimands and warnings. In early autumn of 2019, the company ultimately fired him for his negligence. Louis Sacco was very upset by this turn of events. As he packed up his things at the office, it seemed he was about to cry. Celeste experienced mixed feelings. On one hand, she felt relieved that he would disappear from her life and stop bothering her with persistent overtures. But on the other hand, she felt some guilt believing his dismissal partly happened because of her. As a department manager, Celeste thanked Louis for his years of service and escorted him to the building exit. She tried to encourage him with a pat on the shoulder and sincerely wished him luck as they parted ways. However, it turned out this harmless act was a mistake, a catalyst that fueled Louis's belief they could make their relationship work. Instantly, Louis decided that Celeste was simply afraid to start an office romance since she was his boss and feared general disapproval or damage to her career. Now convinced nothing stood in the way of their potential happiness together, Louis, overwhelmed by his emotions, unexpectedly kissed Celeste on the cheek. An awkward pause ensued. Stunned by his audacity, Celeste didn't know how to react, so she just turned around and hurried back into the office building without saying anything. This reaction further convinced Louis that Celeste harbored feelings for him and believed he should not give up pursuing her. Just days after, Louis created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. At first, she accepted it, thinking no harm would come of it. But when he started bombarding her with requests to meet up and go out together, she tried to decline politely. Eventually, she just blocked him. The following day, the former colleague sent another friend request from a newly created profile. Celeste tried to ignore it. However, he began commenting on her photos, praising her looks, and mentioning how great they would be as a couple. She then adjusted her profile settings so only friends could send her messages or comment on her photos or posts. A week later, during a family gathering, She mentioned the persistent pursuer to her relatives. She also recounted the strange incident from the day he was fired. Her family listened but assumed it wasn't serious, and that the unwanted admirer would lose interest and disappear from her life soon. Louis didn't have Celeste's personal phone number while they worked together. They only communicated through work channels. But now Celeste began receiving peculiar romantic messages from an unknown number. She quickly guessed who they were from. The admirer sent romantic poems he had written, praised her beauty again, and tried to convince her to meet up. Celeste answered his call only once in an attempt to have a serious conversation with him. She explained that nothing could happen between them and tried to persuade him to stop pursuing her. Nevertheless, he didn't listen. Instead, he just complimented how pleasant her voice was and expressed how glad he was that she had finally picked up. After this conversation, she tried blocking him again, but each time he'd call from a new number. Eventually, she decided to change her own number. Still within a week or so later, Louis managed to find it out and continued his telephone harassment. Seeking some form of protection for about half a year, Celeste kept unsuccessful attempts at ignoring the crazed admirer. She blocked his numbers and fake social media pages, but he persisted with messages and continually disrupted her usual life. The stream of messages continued, and over time, their nature shifted from romantic to bold and threatening. The man stopped asking politely. He began demanding meetings and detailing his delusional, intimate fantasies about what he intended to do with her immediately. However, that wasn't the worst of it. It became evident that the stalker began following her from work to home, where she lived. Celeste didn't initially realize that Louis was now present in her life beyond just the messages. He was literally tracking her every move. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but convinced herself each time that it was merely a product of nerves or imagination. When she finally understood that she was not mistaken and that Louis, with his obsessive behavior, was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. Celeste wanted law enforcement to issue a special order prohibiting the stalker from approaching her and her home. However, the officers were indifferent, even mocking at times. According to them, writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages is neither illegal nor punishable. Since Celeste couldn't provide evidence of Louis following her and lurking near her home, they simply asked her to leave the precinct and not hinder them from catching real criminals. For another 6 months, Celeste continued to endure relentless harassment from her former colleague. During workdays, she frequently noticed his car parked across the street from her office. In the evenings, he would drive past her house several times. She constantly felt his gaze on her, increasing her anxiety and making daily life tense. In August 2020, Celeste approached the police again. This time, she provided photo and video evidence on her phone, showing that Louis was indeed following her. A different officer took her statement this time, an officer who took the situation more seriously and expressed surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised her to immediately go to court, where a restraining order was issued against Louis. He was notified that he could no longer call, approach her, or try to contact her in any other way. Clearly, the man did not expect this turn of events and indeed disappeared from Celeste's sight for a few weeks. She was happy for the first time in a while. She felt free and believed that the harasser would no longer bother her. However, her relief was premature. Less than a month later, she began receiving messages from unknown numbers. Initially, Louis pleaded and then demanded she retract her statement and remove the restraining order, as he believed it interfered with their romantic relationship. After receiving several messages, Celeste immediately went to the police, since her pursuer had violated the restraining order. Now, he had to face the consequences. The man was fined and warned that further violations could lead to much more severe measures. If he didn't leave the young woman alone, he could end up in jail. After this incident, Louis did not make his presence known for almost 2 months. The young woman believed he had finally left her alone. In September 2020, Celeste met a young man named Chris Reedsdale. He was just a year older than her, and they quickly found they had many common interests, views on life, and goals. Consequently, a romantic relationship soon developed between them. She told her new boyfriend about the harassment from her former admirer and confessed that although Louis had not appeared, she still felt anxious. Chris endeavored to surround his girlfriend with care and attention, doing everything to make her feel safe and worry-free. In early November, Celeste invited Chris to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Celeste's choice was well received by her family. They quickly hit it off, and her mother even jested that her daughter was now in safe hands. The following weeks passed peacefully, with no sign of the former admirer, who did not attempt to contact Celeste. The young woman found joy in spending all her free time with Chris. It appeared she no longer worried about Louis possibly barging back into her life or causing her any harm. On November 15, 2020, the love-struck couple decided to go out on a date. They sat in a cafe, enjoying each other's company. During this pleasant moment, the young woman suggested they capture it by taking a selfie. The photo turned out very romantic. They were sitting at the same table, embracing, smiling, and looking genuinely happy. Celeste was so fond of this picture that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. In doing so, she aimed to share the news of her new relationship and indicate how serious things were between them. Chris also posted the photo on his page with a touching caption about how much he loved Celeste and how he would do everything to keep her eyes sparkling with happiness as depicted in the picture. Unfortunately, this outing would be their last as a couple. On the evening of their final date, Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, and they said goodbye with plans to meet again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen talking with her mother about her boyfriend before heading to bed, since she had to get up early for work the next morning. On Monday, November 16, 2020, around 4 a.m., Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass, but didn't immediately grasp what was happening. Then there were suspicious noises. Banging, screams, and commotion followed. At first, it seemed like these noises were coming from outside on the street. However, she soon realized they were emanating from within the house. Eggy leapt out of bed, threw on a robe, and rushed to her daughter's room. She flung open the door and in the dim light saw someone literally jumping away from Celeste's bed before escaping through a broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was confronted with a horrifying scene. Her daughter lay in a pool of her own blood, covered in cuts and small shards of broken glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, gasping for air. Her eyes were wide open, staring upward. Immediately, her mother called emergency services and tried to stem the deep bleeding wounds on her daughter's body until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, it was too late. By the time police doctors got there, she had already passed away. The medical examiners later found over 20 penetrating stab wounds on her body, with the fatal blow aimed at her heart. During the investigation, the prime suspect was scrutinized. Analyzing the situation and comparing it with Eggy's testimony, police concluded that the assailant took less than 3 minutes to break into the victim's room through the window and carry out the attack before her mother entered. The suspect used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, while Celeste tried to defend herself as indicated by numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if her daughter had any enemies, Eggy could only recall one name: Louis Sacco. He had obsessively pursued the young woman for over a year, harassing her with calls and threatening messages. This information was corroborated by other family members as well as friends and colleagues. At the scene, the suspect left many bloody fingerprints, and DNA was found on a fence he jumped over while fleeing since he had injured his hand. It became imperative to detain and interrogate Louis immediately as the prime suspect to verify and compare all evidence and witness statements. Louis was arrested that same day, but initially vehemently denied his involvement in the incident. He insisted that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. Forensic results later confirmed the bloody fingerprints found in the victim's room and on the fence to him. Law enforcement also highlighted the restraining order against approaching the young woman, which he had violated. Additionally, on the evening before the tragedy, it was discovered that Lue had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store. This transaction was captured on surveillance cameras at the checkout. Lue used the hammer to break into the house through a window and then used the knife in his fatal attack on the unfortunate woman. A calculated criminal or a man in need of treatment. The evidence against Sacco was undeniable, further underscored by his long-term surveillance of the victim, knowing practically everything about her. The final trigger for him appeared to be a photo posted by the young woman on social media with her new boyfriend. After seeing this, he went to a store, bought a knife and hammer, and under cover of night, went to Celeste's home to end her life. His actions were seen as calculated and premeditated criminal activity. Yet Lue's behavior was quite erratic, raising questions about his mental stability. Notably, at nearly 39 years old, he had never married, continued living with his parents, had almost no friends, and never held a job for long periods. People described him as nervous and introverted with severe socialization issues. Additionally, Lue had a biological brother serving a lengthy sentence for another criminal act at that time. Following these events, a forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered for Lue, with his attorney insisting that his client required specialized treatment instead of imprisonment. This argument angered and upset the victim's family, who feared that this cruel individual might evade punishment. After interviewing Lue and analyzing his behavior, psychiatric experts concluded he did indeed suffer from some mental disorders. However, and it's important, they determined that at the time of the crime he was fully aware of his actions. Furthermore, he had meticulously planned the crime in advance, carefully considering the details. As a result, despite his efforts to feign insanity, Sacco would inevitably face a trial. The trial and subsequent sentencing did not occur until the autumn of 2023, 3 years after the tragic death of the young woman. During this period, the criminal made several attempts to demonstrate his mental illness, hoping to avoid conviction for deliberate criminal acts. He spent most of this time in a psychiatric facility. In the courtroom, Lue appeared calm and detached, showing little interest in the proceedings. Although he admitted his guilt, he maintained that his intention was not to take the girl's life, but to win her affection. However, the jury unanimously found Lue guilty on all charges. He was then sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 30 years. Celeste's law, which ultimately was not passed, aimed to address the fact that existing laws did not consider online stalking and phone harassment as criminal offenses. The parents of Celeste highlighted that their daughter had sought police protection as early as 2020, but her complaint was not taken seriously due to the limitations of the current legislation. Over the 3-year period leading up to the trial, the mother of the deceased young woman, along with legal experts and activists, collaborated to develop Celeste's law. This law sought to establish criminal accountability for online stalking through social media platforms, text messages, and emails. The hope was that such a law would provide protection for countless women and girls, preventing similar tragedies from occurring. Despite these efforts, the investigations revealed that most online stalkers remained covert and did not attempt any direct contact with their victims. The amendments made to the legislation primarily focused on restricting access to personal information on social media platforms. In cases involving severe stalking with threats, a restraining order could be issued, similar to real-life scenarios. Nevertheless, there remained a lack of criminal accountability for such crimes. Currently, a stalker might only receive a verbal warning for their actions, and in cases of repeated violations, they could face fines, but not always. The enactment of Celeste's law, with its proposed changes, remains pending. In the somber confines of the courtroom, Menhaz Zaman stood before the judge, his voice trembling with remorse as he expressed the depths of his regret for the irreparable harm he had caused. With heavy hearts, he sought forgiveness from all those he had wronged, especially those who had lost loved ones as a result of his unforgivable actions. Acknowledging the profound damage inflicted upon his family and the wider community, Menhaz bowed his head in shame, unable to escape the weight of his guilt. November 2020 marked the fateful moment when Menhaz's fate was sealed with a life sentence, condemning him to spend the next 4 decades behind bars. At the tender age of 24, he was stripped of his freedom, serving time for the deaths of 4 individuals who had once been dear to him. His father, Manur, taken at 59, his mother, Momotaz, at 50, his grandmother at 70, and his sister, tragically gone at the tender age of 21. Despite the sacrifices made for his well-being, Menhaz's actions had brought nothing but devastation upon his family. As he languished in the confines of his prison cell, Menhaz grappled with the emptiness and loneliness that engulfed his once vibrant life. Cut off from the virtual world he had once sought solace in, he was forced to confront the gravity of his prolonged deception. In the quiet solitude of his confinement, he reflected on the twisted web of lies he had spun to maintain his facade, the weight of his deception bearing down upon him like a leaden burden. The truth of Menhaz's deception came to light as he stood trial, each revelation serving as a painful reminder of the betrayal and deceit that had torn his family apart. The Zan family, once united in love and solidarity, now faced the harsh reality of their shattered lives, haunted by the knowledge that their own flesh and blood had been responsible for their unimaginable loss. In the end, as Menhaz faced the consequences of his actions, he could only hope that his remorse would serve as a meager consolation to those he had wronged. But as the doors of his prison cell closed behind him, he knew that no amount of regret could ever undo the irreparable damage he had wrought upon the lives of those he held most dear. As the fake graduation date of July 28 drew near, Menhaz's behavior took a disturbing turn. Seemingly unraveling before the eyes of those around him, he adopted the persona of a lost soul, referring to himself as a subhuman unworthy of life. Dark jokes about suicide peppered his conversations, revealing the depths of his despair. But who was this troubled individual? Menhaz Zaman, a young Canadian with a promising future, appeared to be living the dream as a mechanical engineering student at York University. However, the truth was far from what it seemed. In reality, Menhaz had never set foot on the university campus. Concealing this fact from his parents, he plunged deeper into a world of deceit, fabricating elaborate tales to maintain his facade of academic success. Each passing year brought new challenges as he struggled to uphold his double life, the pressure mounting as graduation loomed on the horizon. The strain took its toll on Menhaz's mental well-being, pushing him to the brink of desperation. In a desperate bid for attention, Menhaz resorted to unthinkable measures. On that fateful day, he committed the ultimate act of betrayal, snuffing out the lives of his own family members in a chilling display of violence. Posting photos of his heinous crime on his Discord channel, he sought to shock and horrify, drawing the gaze of a horrified audience. While some initially dismissed his actions as a tasteless prank, the grim reality soon became undeniable. Despite Menhaz's efforts to conceal his identity, the truth of his origins lay in a land far from the bustling streets of Toronto. Born from the complex tapestry of Bangladesh, his family had harbored dreams of a better life in the promise of a new beginning. Manyo Zan, his father, and Momas, his mother, had embarked on a journey of hope, leaving behind their homeland to seek their fortune in Canada. Their arrival in Toronto marked the beginning of a new chapter, filled with aspirations for a brighter future. With the birth of Menhaz and later Mesa, they endeavored to create a loving and nurturing environment for their children. Momas, in particular, was hailed as a beacon of kindness and generosity, her unwavering support a source of strength for the family and the broader Bangladeshi immigrant community. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy lay a web of secrets and lies, woven by Menhaz in his relentless pursuit of acceptance and validation. The tragic events that unfolded would serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the devastating consequences of unchecked deception. and as Menhaz's dark descent came to light, the world could only watch in horror, grappling with the incomprehensible depths of his betrayal. Moni Roos, husband to Momotaz, possessed a quiet demeanor that belied his deep sense of pride and devotion to his family. Known as an introvert within the neighborhood, he commanded respect through his modesty and unwavering dedication. A devout Muslim, Moni placed his family above all else, embodying the values of faith and integrity in his daily life. For years, he toiled as a taxi driver, his commitment to his profession earning him recognition as one of the finest in the city. Having relocated to the bustling metropolis in pursuit of a better life, Moni and Momotaz harbored lofty ambitions for their children. Mesa and Menhaz, the apples of their parents' eyes, were envisioned as future pillars of success, destined for lucrative careers that would afford them comfort and prosperity. Despite their own humble beginnings, Moni and Momotaz were determined to provide their offspring with every opportunity for advancement, sparing no effort in their quest for success. Their journey towards prosperity began modestly, with the purchase of a humble abode on Mauen Road in Scarborough. Through prudent financial planning and astute investments, they soon expanded their portfolio, acquiring 2 additional properties in the same area and a house nearby in Danforth. Momotaz assumed the role of property manager, overseeing their growing assets with precision and care. As the family's fortunes continued to ascend, so too did Momotaz's sense of responsibility towards her children and their burgeoning real estate empire. Recognizing the need for support, her mother Fosa made the journey from India to lend a helping hand. With her assistance, Momotaz found equilibrium between her professional endeavors and personal life, ensuring that both flourished in tandem. In 2006, they embarked on a significant investment, purchasing a spacious 4-bedroom house in the neighboring town of Markham. This move symbolized their aspirations for a brighter future, aligning with the widely held belief that success in life hinged on careers in medicine or engineering. Mesa harbored dreams of becoming a neurosurgeon, while Menhaz was earmarked for a career in engineering, in line with his parents' hopes and aspirations. However, the path to success proved arduous, fraught with challenges and unforeseen obstacles. Melissa, their eldest daughter, rebelled against their expectations, often veering off course with reckless behavior. Her defiance strained the familial bonds, leading to conflicts that spilled beyond the confines of their home and attracted the unwanted attention of law enforcement. Despite their best efforts, Moni and Momotaz struggled to rein in Melissa's wayward tendencies, her actions casting a shadow over the family's aspirations. In stark contrast, Menhaz exuded a quiet and reserved demeanor, forging a close bond with his mother, Momotaz. She doted on him, fulfilling his every need and desire, showering him with love and attention. Menhaz, the eldest son, felt the weight of his parents' expectations bearing down on him, driving him to excel and meet their lofty standards. Yet, beneath the facade of familial harmony, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual realm of online gaming, immersing himself in virtual worlds where he found refuge from the pressures of reality. His fascination with MMO games like Perfect World provided an escape from the rigors of everyday life, offering a platform for self-expression and social interaction. While his peers pursued academic endeavors, Menhaz retreated further into the confines of his room, spending hours on end immersed in online gaming communities. Despite the facade of academic success, Menhaz grappled with a sense of inadequacy and the burden of unmet expectations. Upon receiving news of his acceptance into the mechanical engineering program at York University, Menhaz's achievement was hailed as a triumph, further cementing his status as the family's favored child. Yet, beneath the veneer of success lay a mounting pressure to prove himself worthy of their adulation. With each passing day, the weight of expectations bore down on Menhaz, driving him further into the depths of his virtual refuge. As the weight of expectations mounted, Menhaz retreated further into the virtual realm, seeking solace in the digital landscapes of online gaming. Venturing into an enhanced version of the Perfect World game, he found camaraderie among fellow players, forging connections within the confines of this virtual community. Through the popular social network Discord, Menhaz maintained contact with friends and acquaintances, finding a sense of belonging that eluded him in the real world. Within the game, Menhaz shed the constraints of his shy and reserved persona, embracing his true self in a space where authenticity thrived. Here, amidst the pixels and avatars, he felt liberated from the burdens of reality, free to express himself without fear of judgment or censure. The supportive atmosphere fostered friendships that transcended the boundaries of the game, providing Menhaz with a sense of belonging that he struggled to find elsewhere. Meanwhile, Melissa's rebellion continued unabated, her defiance a constant source of tension within the family home. Despite their efforts to rein her in, her actions only served to exacerbate the already strained atmosphere. Her departure from home did little to alleviate the palpable tension, leaving a void that Menhaz sought to fill with his virtual escapades. In the eyes of their parents, Menhaz emerged as the beacon of hope, the embodiment of their aspirations for a brighter future. They boasted of his supposed acceptance into York University's prestigious engineering program, basking in the imagined glory of his academic achievements. However, beneath the facade of parental pride lay a web of deception, as Menhaz's purported success crumbled under scrutiny. In reality, Menhaz's academic journey took a different trajectory, far removed from the lofty heights his parents envisioned. Instead of York University, he found himself enrolled in the less prestigious confines of Seneca Community College, his dreams of academic success shattered. Struggling to keep pace with his studies, he grappled with feelings of loneliness and disillusionment, his sense of identity eroded by the weight of unmet expectations. Frustrated by the suffocating grip of parental control, Menhaz rebelled against the constraints imposed upon him, casting aside the religious beliefs that once anchored him. His disillusionment only deepened as he confronted the stark reality of his circumstances, grappling with a sense of betrayal and abandonment. Amidst the wreckage of broken dreams, Menhaz sought solace in the virtual embrace of online gaming, the only refuge left in a world fraught with disappointment and deceit. Despite his tumultuous relationships and mounting academic struggles, Menhaz sought solace and independence through his online interactions. His burgeoning romance with a girl he met on the internet only served to stoke his parents' disapproval and exacerbate his frustration. Nevertheless, Menhaz remained determined to assert his autonomy, finding refuge in the immersive world of Perfect World and the vibrant Discord community. Initially, Menhaz managed to maintain a facade of academic diligence, but as his obsession with gaming intensified, his grades suffered a precipitous decline. His once promising academic career spiraled into chaos as he began skipping classes and neglecting his studies altogether. Despite his academic freefall, Menhaz managed to conceal the extent of his academic failures from his unsuspecting parents, who remained oblivious to his academic woes. Each day, Menhaz embarked on a carefully orchestrated charade, leaving home ostensibly to attend classes at York University. In reality, he spent his days ensconced in a local cafe, engrossed in his virtual pursuits. From there, he would make a cursory visit to the gym before returning to his online haven, where he whiled away the hours until the late hours of the night. Menhaz's online persona belied the darkness that consumed him, as he frequently joked with his virtual companions about his impending incarceration and his impending departure from their midst. However, beneath the veneer of levity, his humor took on a sinister edge, laced with aggression and hostility. His increasingly provocative remarks drew ire from community members, culminating in his eventual banishment from the platform. Despite the mounting concerns surrounding Menhaz's behavior, his online associates dismissed his antics as mere attention-seeking, failing to recognize the depths of his isolation and despair. As Menhaz retreated further into his virtual cocoon, Melissa sought to forge her own path, severing ties with her family and pursuing her academic aspirations at York University. From the outside, the Zaman family appeared to be on the cusp of a new chapter filled with promise and potential. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Menhaz's descent into darkness would soon shatter the illusion of familial harmony, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. On July 27, 2019, the Zaman household buzzed with the usual activity, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Menhaz, calculating and methodical, seized the opportunity to set his sinister plan into motion. With chilling composure, he crept into his mother's bedroom, armed with a crowbar. In a swift and brutal assault, he rendered her unconscious with a single blow to the head before mercilessly slitting her throat. The scene of carnage was soon replicated as Menhaz turned his attention to his unsuspecting grandmother, dispatching her with the same ruthless efficiency. Having executed his heinous acts, Menhaz retreated to the confines of his room, his facade of normalcy now shattered. With a sense of perverse satisfaction, he chronicled his atrocities on Discord, sharing grotesque images of his victims' mutilated bodies alongside the implements of his depravity. To some, accustomed to Menhaz's macabre sense of humor, the ghastly display seemed like another tasteless joke. However, for those unaccustomed to such dark behavior, it sparked genuine alarm and disbelief. As the gravity of Menhaz's actions began to dawn on his online acquaintances, panic ensued. The realization that a potential spree of violence was unfolding in real time left them feeling helpless and powerless to intervene. Desperate to prevent further bloodshed, they frantically scrambled to identify the perpetrator, but Menhaz had meticulously concealed his identity, leaving them grasping at straws. Amidst the chaos, Junior, a close friend of Menhaz, found himself bombarded with inquiries from concerned users seeking insight into his friend's motives. Driven by a sense of urgency, Junior confronted Menhaz, seeking confirmation of the grim reality depicted in the disturbing images. Menhaz's chilling response confirmed their worst fears, revealing his intention to claim the lives of his remaining family members. Meanwhile, oblivious to the unfolding tragedy, Melissa returned home, greeted by an eerie silence that belied the horror lurking within. Unbeknownst to her, she had walked into a nightmare orchestrated by her own brother. As she ventured further into the house, she fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen her mother and grandmother, her life snuffed out by the hands of her own flesh and blood. In the aftermath of his sister's murder, Menhaz callously documented her demise, capturing her lifeless form in a macabre photograph. With chilling detachment, he shared the image with a friend named John, callously recounting the harrowing ordeal as if it were nothing more than a macabre spectacle to be observed and dissected. In a private message to John, Menhaz uttered words of self-condemnation, branding himself as a pathetic coward and a subhuman, consumed by a profound sense of shame and self-loathing. With a macabre sense of detachment, he proceeded to inundate John with a series of grisly photographs, each one more harrowing than the last. Among them was an image of the murder weapon, and even a disturbing selfie featuring Menhaz himself, brandishing a bloodied knife, a grotesque testament to the depths of his depravity. Horrified by the gruesome evidence before him, John wasted no time in sharing these chilling images with the rest of the Discord group, each photo serving as damning proof of Menhaz's heinous crimes. As the community rallied to gather as much evidence as possible against him, Menhaz continued to play the part of the oblivious gamer, biding his time until his father's return. When Manure, Menhaz's father, unwittingly stepped into the trap laid by his own son, he fell victim to the same brutal fate that had befallen the rest of his family. With cold precision, Menhaz launched his final assault, stabbing his father in the neck, before callously capturing the aftermath in yet another chilling photograph. In the wake of his heinous acts, Menhaz grappled with his own demons, acknowledging his cowardice and selfishness in a series of remorseful messages to his online acquaintances. Expressing a warped sense of resignation, he resigned himself to a life behind bars, inviting his friends to bear witness to the grim spectacle he had orchestrated. Amidst the chaos, one Discord user devised a plan to trace Menhaz's location through his IP address, a digital breadcrumb trail that led authorities straight to his doorstep. As the net closed in around him, Menhaz made no attempt to flee, choosing instead to confront the consequences of his actions head-on. 12 agonizing hours after the bloodshed, law enforcement officers descended upon the Zaman residence, their suspicions confirmed by the sight of Menhaz peering down at them from his bedroom window. Surrendering himself to the authorities without resistance, Menhaz offered no protest as he was led away in handcuffs, his stoic demeanor betraying no hint of remorse or regret. Charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, Menhaz stood trial as the weight of his crimes bore down upon him. With the damning evidence amassed by the online gaming community, serving as irrefutable proof of his guilt. There remained little doubt as to his ultimate fate. In the end, justice prevailed, but the scars left behind by Menhaz's reign of terror would linger for years to come, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human soul. Lisa Maria Kaiser was born in 1994 in a large family where her 8 siblings also grew up. It was a large, but far from prosperous family. Parents were busy with their own problems and did not show love and care towards their children. Moreover, there were rumors that abuse and violence were rampant in the family. The story in question unfolded in the year 2020, at the very time when the whole world was consumed with the fight against COVID-19. In one corner of Ecuador, quietly and unnoticed, truly terrible events were unfolding. Here, in the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story was born and raised. Lisa Maria Kaiser, a woman with an enigmatic gaze, whose life story became a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that unfortunate Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. They were words full of despair, because their paths with David at that time had already almost parted. In these lines, she confessed her love for him and her unexpected new pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa wrote that life was losing its meaning for her, and the decision to terminate the pregnancy was inevitable. Throughout the night, Lisa pleaded with David to come to her, but his refusal was resolute. His parents also urged him to stay home, and David took their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors in Lisa's home heard a faint cry for help. Looking out the window, they found a woman lying on the floor with signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to help her, immediately calling emergency services. The doctors and police arrived and found Lisa in a critical condition, but still alive. After administering first aid, she was immediately hospitalized. However, in the house, her children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to help them. Their little hearts had stopped beating at that point. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon learning of the tragedy, immediately arrived on the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital and his children were found without signs of life. After several days of fighting for life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, the investigators, guided by their findings, had presented the prosecutor's office with sufficiently convincing arguments to issue an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. When she was released from the hospital, she was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that Lisa undergo a psychological and psychiatric evaluation, as her state of mind required further investigation as part of the upcoming trial. Lisa ended up in a rehabilitation center, and doctors and psychologists took up their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa opened up about her difficult childhood, where her parents fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a noticeable impact on her state of mind, and moments of quarrels and her parents' divorce became an integral part of her memories. Such a childhood forced Lisa to go to work from the age of 11 to be able to study. The girl strived to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been abused. She talked about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate his spouse and then to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy with the children, investigators working at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. These finds later revealed traces of epilepsy pills belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals requiring identification. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, and after noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, noticed a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke down the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket, with characteristic signs of having been there for a long time. Later, further investigation revealed that the discovered body belonged to Jaime Yanchaguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jaime had been reported missing by his family days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchaguano, Jaime's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jaime, where he mentioned that illegal substance traffickers were holding him captive and demanding a ransom of $8,000. She strongly warned Jaime's family not to contact the police. This claim became a crucial point in a complex investigation, as detectives sought to solve the tragedy and uncover if there were any other hidden victims. During her interrogation, Lisa revealed that in 2020, while working at a cookie factory, she met Jaime Ian Chiguano. According to her, they became friends. Lisa wanted to return to her husband, who allegedly planned to blackmail Jaime for money. David made it clear to Lisa that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David gave Lisa a white powder and told her to put it in Jaime's food. Once she did, Jaime fell asleep and never woke up. Realizing what had happened, Lisa, in desperation, tried to win back her husband but failed. In her despair, she ingested the same poison and gave it to her children. However, the poison did not have the expected effect on her, and she sought help from her neighbors to save herself from the horror that had befallen her children. Following her testimony, investigators launched a thorough investigation, but no evidence of David's involvement was found. No one close to the couple could have foreseen that Lisa Maria and David Acosta's lives would take such a tragic turn. When they met, Lisa was only 16 years old and still in high school, a dreamy and romantic girl, while David was a strong and determined young man. Their friendship quickly developed into strong feelings, leading to Lisa's unexpected pregnancy. Although their families disapproved of their relationship, David's parents supported their son and welcomed Lisa into their home. In difficult times, David's family provided genuine support to the young couple, even inviting Lisa to live with them to ensure she completed high school. When Lisa turned 18, the couple got married. 2 years later, they were expecting their second child, a daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own home, giving them an apartment where they found a corner of family happiness. However, over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. Both spouses were unfaithful, leading to mistrust and disappointment. Their once boundless love began to weaken. Lisa also complained of psychological abuse from David, prompting her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, forcing David to leave the family home. At this point, Lisa began to blackmail David, demanding money for the chance to see their children. In early September 2020, Lisa's life took an unexpected turn when her eldest son began suffering from seizures. In desperation, she took him to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing his condition, doctors conducted tests and diagnosed a focal form of epilepsy, a severe condition affecting a specific part of the brain. Doctors advised Lisa to undergo further tests, including MRIs, and to consult specialists urgently. However, Lisa ignored these recommendations. A month later, her son suffered another seizure and they returned to the emergency room. Reviewing his medical history, doctors discovered Lisa had not followed their earlier advice, failed to complete tests, and had not seen specialists, leaving her son without necessary treatment. They warned her that continued neglect could lead to legal consequences. Despite the warnings, Lisa disregarded the medical advice. A few weeks later, after her son's condition resurfaced, she called David, who was alarmed by her serious tone. She informed him that a social worker would visit to discuss their son's diagnosis and treatment. On the day of the appointment, David arrived, but the social worker had already left. To brighten the waiting time, Lisa offered him a drink. However, as David drank the drink, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition was worsening, and the social worker had not shown up. So David decided to go home to get something to deal with his discomfort. The next morning, David woke up in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb. Every step caused discomfort, and his eyes hurt. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance. David was taken to the hospital where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system, but given that he hadn't used anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have happened. Eventually, he speculated that perhaps someone had deliberately slipped him some substance in a public place. David was grateful for his life and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lisa made the decision to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman looking for work. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's house. Lisa urged her to take a pill that she said helped prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, an epidemic of which was at its height at the time. Claiming that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lisa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel sick. She felt a headache. Her stomach began to upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia showed up. It turned out that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lisa didn't answer, which alerted Patricia. She decided to check what had happened and immediately went to her house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, who was practically fainting already. Lisa shared with her cousin what had happened and expressed concern. Learning that Lisa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia immediately did so herself. After a while, doctors arrived and sent Bertha to the hospital. The condition of the victim managed to stabilize. Doctors diagnosed poisoning with a toxic substance, which often happens when using various medications. Doctors decided that Bertha did not tolerate some component of the composition of the pills from COVID-19. A few months before this tragic incident, in June of the same year, Lisa's former buddy, Mark Escanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of his death had gone unnoticed. But now, given all these strange circumstances, Mark's case required additional attention. Investigators scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lisa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before Mark's death. This fact added new evidence to the investigation, pointing to Lisa's possible involvement in the incident. But suddenly, a new accusation was made against Lisa. Her own family made a shocking report to the police. It turns out that on September 2nd, the family had a family gathering where Lisa offered to let everyone taste a drink of her own making. 7 brothers and sisters of the young woman, as well as their parents, drank the unknown drink and immediately felt sick. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lisa's father claimed that while the relatives were seeking medical attention, his daughter stole $1,300 from the house. Now the investigation included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident that jeopardized the lives and health of her own family members. As it turned out, that wasn't all. Investigators encountered another strange event. In May of that year, Jose Luis Erazo, a friend of Lisa's, was found dead in his home. A few days before, Jose had suddenly disappeared, and neighbors soon smelled a rotting odor, prompting them to contact the authorities. An examination of the body initially revealed nothing suspicious, and was ruled a heart attack. But one of Jose's sisters suspected something strange and hid a bottle of alcohol found in the refrigerator. In addition, Jose's family noticed that some items were missing from the house. It turned out that Lisa and Jose were friends, and when the guy died, the alleged killer contacted his relatives by phone. With a distraught voice, she stated that Jose owed her a large sum of money, and she had to contact the family to repay the debt. This cunning plan did not work, and a little later Lisa called Jose's family again, changing her voice to conceal her identity. Identifying herself as Jose's friend, she claimed that she was pregnant by him and now had to apply for child support. Although Jose's family did not believe these stories, Lisa was not about to give up and made a third attempt to deceive them. She said she knew who was responsible for Jose's death and offered to meet to uncover the details. Had she not been arrested on charges of killing her own children in Jaime, the list of victims might have gotten longer. When the media reported the arrest of Lisa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood. They immediately reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic examination to determine the true cause of death. The relatives were not mistaken. Traces of poison were found in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lisa Maria Kaiser for the murder of her two children, whose names and photos were classified, and for Jaime Yanchaguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lisa had been in contact from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement said that Lisa gave her children a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs. In interrogations, she claimed that she had grown desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for the children. In fact, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the defendant a court pass and ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The children's trial next took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a set of evidence to prove Lisa's guilt. Among them were statements by David, who revealed the content of messages the wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she claimed that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She said she didn't know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell. But now she felt as if she was in hell. Lisa added that she doesn't expect her husband to forgive her because she knows he hated her, and now he will hate her even more. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, stating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother tried to take a few steps to call for help, but fell and died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was extremely clear. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. The deaths were the result of suffocation caused by pulmonary edema, an intoxication caused by a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectant. The prosecution also charged Lisa with the death of Jaime Yanchaguano, whose body was found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was also suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing raised the issue of Lisa's irresponsible attitude to her son's health after being diagnosed with localized epilepsy. The mother ignored instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations, and when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition was exacerbated by her own mother's negligence. Warnings from medical professionals did not change her attitude toward her son's treatment, leading to a threatened termination of her parental rights. Lisa's mental health investigations revealed her to be highly emotional and environmentally dependent. She sought constant attention and understanding from others and experienced severe anxiety when events did not unfold according to her plan. She also exhibited a tendency to self-harm. She attempted to say goodbye to her life at least 3 times, but was unsuccessful each time. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The findings of the psychological analysis also emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lisa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a long trial that lasted 10 months, Lisa Maria Kaiser was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months imprisonment. In addition to this, she was ordered to pay David a compensation of more than $20,000. It was noted in the press that Lisa remained calm throughout the proceedings and only showed emotion when her children were mentioned. The Jaime Yanchaguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to be unfinished. New details were revealed during the court hearings. Lisa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, but claimed she got it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lisa, she did not want to take Jaime's life. She wanted to intimidate his family so she could then extort money. She did demand $8,000 as ransom. Experts called the plan disorganized, which ultimately led to the crime. In addition, forensic tests revealed that it wasn't that simple. Jaime was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was strangulation. The body was found with a shattered ribcage and wire around the neck. Lisa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and cement him in. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lissa bought building materials during the days of Jaime's disappearance. After the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. At that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lissa called Jaime's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters, and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the lack of conclusive evidence that Lissa was involved in Jaime's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and received a 22-year prison sentence, as well as a sentence to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jaime's trial was underway, the investigation of Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Arazo, Lissa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lissa had given to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lissa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then put the poison in the drink. A glass with Lissa and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was provided to authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lissa had asked Mark to help her financially, and there is evidence that he loaned her at least $120. Mark was Lissa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Arazo, remain unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of being formally charged and brought to trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lissa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her known throughout the country as Doña Venado. Lissa Maria Kaisi is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims have endured terrible suffering, and their relatives have suffered unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lissa could be released when she turns 70 years old. It is still unclear what motivated Doña Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her act the result of resentment for not getting what she expected in life? Many speculate that the motive was money, and in David's case, Lissa acted out of a lust for revenge, which led to the tragedy with her children. The most horrific part of this story is not only the number of victims left in the path of Doña Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have guessed that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away so absurdly and cruelly. Thanks for watching, guys. Jack was with you. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the bell not to miss new stories from around the world. See you soon. Take care.